I figured I'd talk about parables today, and I'll be honest, like, the reason is twofold. One is selfish, and one I think parables are a really good reason, or topic. So the selfish reason, I'll be honest, we were doing this series back at church, and our recording for this one just didn't happen. So I'm really going to use your recording to supplement our recordings. And the second one is one, I think the parables of Jesus are so important for us to dive into because Jesus spoke in so many different parables. And so when we talk about parables, right, I'll skip ahead a couple slides. Why did Jesus talk about parables has to be one of the questions that we wrestle with when approaching parables. All right? And so in order to kind of unlock the question, well, why did Jesus speak in parables, we do have to ask ourselves, well, what is a parable? Okay? What is a parable? So anybody want to guess what is a parable?
Examples.
Huh?
Examples.
Examples. Okay. Anything else? Okay, so stories that we can learn from, okay? And so when we talk about stories we can learn from, like if you have children, like you hope that when you get a children's book and you read the children's book, that through the story there would be some sort of lessons, right? So parables are one of the ways that we can put things side by side, okay? And really parables looks at comparison, okay? Every parable gives us a comparison. All right, so Jesus told us a story, but that story, like, is teaching us something, okay? And what did Jesus commonly say in his parables? Like, the kingdom of God is like, and then he'd go on and tell a parable, right? So what is he comparing? Kingdom of God to a landowner. Kingdom of God to a man who had two sons. All right, so different things Jesus was trying to compare. All right, and Jesus spoke in a lot of parables. All right, and he used parables because each parable was relatable to the people he was speaking to. So the parables talked about nature, about trees, about families, about society, about economics, giving, all these different things. These are what parables, like at face value, this is what parables talked about. All right? But these were relatable. Was the end goal just to tell a story? No, the end goal was to compare to something else, compare to the kingdom of heaven. All right? And so Jesus spoke in a lot of parables. Did everybody always understand the parable? No. Okay? Didn't. And who really didn't understand parables? Who actually got the nerve to go up and ask them? The disciples, right? So the disciples kept on hearing him say parables, and finally why are you speaking parables? Right? And they asked that question in Matthew chapter 13. And he told the parable of the sower, about the sower who went and threw the seeds, and finally the disciples pulled him aside and said, and the disciples came to him and said, why do you speak to them in parables? All right? Jesus' answer is interesting, okay? And in Matthew chapter 13, verse 11, he says, he answered and said to them, because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. Who finds this, doesn't fit right? At face value, what did Jesus just say? I'm speaking in parables. Where's the dissonance? What's wrong with, at face value, with what Jesus said? What does it make you think parables are good?
Confusing.
Huh?
Confusing.
Okay. They are confusing, okay?
I was asking for you to repeat the question.
So the question is okay, Jesus said, because it had been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. So parables are about the mysteries of heaven. But what is he kind of saying at face value?
To get it
Who's
easy
the-
to understand.
Huh?
To get it easy to explain to them what's going on around the kingdom.
I've missed what you're
To
saying.
get it easy for them
Okay,
to
so-
understand what
So he's kind of saying to the disciples, like, to you it's been given, but to everybody else, like,
Yes.
tough luck.
They don't
they're not gonna
understand.
They don't understand. Okay, but didn't Jesus come for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, so does that like add up?
Not
In our
quite.
minds, it doesn't add up. No, at face value, it doesn't add up because, okay, Jesus came to bring the kingdom of heaven to everybody. One of the ways he was delivering the kingdom of heaven is through the teaching of parables. Disciples like had trouble with the parables, and he said, okay, to you it has been given, but to everybody else, not so much.
Gotta dumb it down for them.
Okay, so we gotta go into this a little bit more. Okay, because truly, like, we can't be satisfied to just say like, okay, well then, only 12 people in the history of Earth were given like the keys to the parables. Right? It doesn't really add up. Because what Jesus was putting inside of each parable was a truth about the kingdom of heaven. And the truth about the kingdom of heaven was for everybody. Right? So now we got to dig a little bit further. So let's go on to verse 12 in Matthew 13. It says, For whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. I will give you an apple. If you can tell me what the key word. That's all I came with today, your apples. Right? But what the key word in this verse is. Figure out what the key word is in this verse, we begin to unlock parables. Kind of a mystery. Has. Okay? For whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. What's has referring to? We unlock has, and then we figure out the rest.
The kingdom?
Okay?
I don't know.
No. Jesus is delivering the kingdom, and he spoke in parables. Okay? Whoever has, more will be given.
Something good. Suggest.
Not a suggestion.
Understanding?
Okay? In order to get to understanding, like if you've studied, do you open up your textbook and understand everything from the first time? No. What do you have to have in order to understand?
The ability
Okay.
to read?
So, yes, the ability to read, but like, I kind of assume that one, to be honest. Right? You got the textbook, I assume you're reading. Right? But you read it again, and then if it doesn't make sense, what do you do?
Reread?
Okay, you can reread or like
Go to Google.
go to different. Okay, go to Google. All right. Go to Google. Go to other resources. Okay, but what are we describing?
Good wisdom.
A desire. What we're describing is a desire and a passion and a zeal. Right? Huh?
They have like faith inside them to know what's going on.
Yeah, they have a desire to have their faith increase. Okay? And so the story came in a parable. Not all parables were easy to understand. So whoever has, to him more will be given, and given in abundance. Okay? Because their has is going to say, okay, I don't get it, let me ask somebody else. Okay, I don't get it, let me read something else. Okay, I don't get it, let me search in another way. Okay, I don't get it, let me pray. Okay, what we're talking about is a spiritual zeal, a spiritual desire to unlock the treasure that's hidden within the parable. Okay, so for whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. All right? So, how many of you, okay, have heard something, like, I didn't really get it, and just kind of left it? I know I'm not the only one.
Oh, yeah, I do
This
it all
kind
the
of a trick question, and everybody's done that, right? We've all heard something either in the scripture, read something, and been like, I don't know what we're talking about, next page, next chapter, let's move on, right? You know, there's plenty of other good things in the Bible. Why like spend time on this one, all right? And on that same verse that you probably passed up, maybe a year or two pass by, you've grown, you've matured, you've heard different things, you read the same verse, and all of a sudden you see it differently, right? And then you start to dig, like, I didn't see that before. All right, so first time around, it was given to us, but we didn't have the has to unlock it, so we lost it. Okay, well, thank God we got a second chance, and we begin to unlock. Okay, we begin to unlock the treasures. So when we talk about parables, right, we're talking about needing to push further, okay, needing to dig harder, to ask tougher questions, to not just be satisfied, like, just say like, oh, I don't get it, time to move on. Okay, if we always did that with our spiritual life, like, we'd end up with really weak spiritual lives. And actually, unfortunately, that's kind of the case in a lot of us, is that we're reading, but we don't push ourselves as much as we push ourselves in our respective careers, okay, in our studies. We don't figure out something at work, ask this person, go to HR, do this, figure out, like, we look at different people. We keep on pushing through. We want to progress in our careers. But for some reason, when we come spiritually, okay, when we don't get it, we tend to back off. Right? We tend to back off.
That's very true.
And that's why this verse is so important from Matthew 7. It says, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks the door will be open. So this is a promise. This is a promise. But it is dependent on our has. Okay, if we have the has, then this verse makes more sense. But if we don't have the has, then this verse is just something nice. Okay? Let's see the next part. Okay? Actually, we'll go through it. All right. So if we continue on Matthew 13, Jesus brings up another, idea for us to think about. It says, therefore I speak to them in parables, because in seeing they do not see, in hearing they do not understand. And in them the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled, which says, hearing you will hear and shall not understand, seeing you will see and not perceive, for the hearts of his people have grown dull. Their ears are hard of hearing, their eyes have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with the ears, lest they should understand with their hearts and turn, so that I should heal them. Okay, so Isaiah kind of spoke about this same idea. And when we read this, at first pass, you can almost take away that, like, it seems like somebody else is coming in and closing their ears and closing their eyes and doing it for them. But is that the spirit in which God functions on? Is that consistent with, like, his message and his life? Was it to come and, like, close everybody's eyes and ears and to open up with specific people? No, that's not consistent. But if we read this verse at face value, we can come away with that. So we got to look a little bit further. Okay, is it God who's really blinding our hearts and closing our ears, or is it because I'm just not pushing? I'm not putting a little elbow grease into my spiritual life, and therefore I'm not gaining the treasures that I want. In Romans, St. Paul says, therefore God has given them up to uncleanliness in the lust of their hearts to dishonor their bodies among themselves. So, like, what God does is he respects our desires. And if our desire is to go and give our bodies over to lust, okay, if that's really what you want, like, I'm not going to stop you. I'm not going to force you this way. But if you want to turn back, you want to seek me, okay, roll up your sleeves and let's get to work. When you ask, I will give you. When you knock, I'll open the door. When you seek, you'll find the answer. But we've become so accustomed to having everything, like, personalized and very quick and very easy. And spiritual matters don't come so quick and so easy. Right? Amazon Prime, that's quick, that's easy. Okay? Parables, not so much. Right? So we kind of have to remind ourselves that I can't approach this world the same way I approach God. Right? wraps it up. He says, "Blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For assuredly I say to you," he's speaking to his disciples now, "I say to you that many prophets and righteous men desired to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear." So he's telling the disciples, look, you've been given something special to walk with me. Everybody wants to be in your shoes. Don't squander it. Who's the one who squandered it? Judas. Okay, he squandered the opportunity. All right. So that's why we speak in parables. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. Any questions? All right. So parables are a powerful way of teaching, both then and now. Okay? We teach in parables quite frequently. Okay? You've probably heard your professors or people at work saying, like, here's a story, da-da-da, and here's the moral that we get out of it. We teach our kids, here's a story, and here's a moral that we get. So parables are a powerful way of teaching. Okay? And they're a common way of teaching, but the beauty of parables is that parables are layered. Okay? Like my favorite quote from Shrek, ogres are like onions. They have many layers. Okay? Parables are like onions. They have many layers. Right? But we gotta dig through the layers. Okay? You're probably gonna cry on the way digging through the layers, but it's okay. You're getting to the core. Okay? You're getting to the core. All right? So I'll give you an example of why we say parables are very layered. All right? 10 virgins, 5 foolish, 5 wise. What's the oil? Represent? Good works, right? At face value, yes. We dig deeper? No. It's not about works. It's about the acquisition of the Holy Spirit. Okay? Parable of the prodigal son. Who do we always focus on? Prodigal son. Who else can we focus on? We can focus on the father. We can focus on the brother. Okay? We can see different aspects. I can look at the prodigal son and read through it, and I'll come up with a sermon to give. Okay? Other people have stared at the picture by Rembrandt of the prodigal son and have written books and novels about it. Okay? Why? Because there's layers. The longer I sit and I look and I meditate and I can enrich myself and I pray, I'll get more out of it. Okay? That's the beauty of parables. So the more I sit and look and think and wrestle with it, the more I'm going to get out of it. Okay? Those who has more will get more out of it. So parables are layered. And lastly, parables are great because parables, okay, is like a picture's worth 1,000 words. So are parables. Parables are worth 1,000 words. Talked about why did Jesus teach in parables, okay, and we also said that parables teach us spiritual truths about the kingdom. Okay, parables teach us spiritual truths about the kingdom covered in a nice story that all of us can relate to. All right, now before we talk about our next parable, okay, or the first parable, not the next parable, first parable, I'm going to give it a preference. All right, now one of the things that Christians, that all of us tend to struggle with, is comparison. Okay? We like to compare. A lot of times, the way God functions doesn't make sense to us. So we compare. Right? We look at outside rewards that everybody else are giving. Okay? While we look at ourselves and like, I'm working so hard, why do they get the reward and I not get the reward? Okay? We look at other people and we're like, gosh, I work just as hard. Why do they have more finances and more flexibility with their finances than I do? And I got to look every month and make sure I'm making ends meet. Okay? I know that this person doesn't even go to church nearly as much as me. They're probably not even donating every month, but yet I'm the one who's struggling. We look and we look at relationships and we're like, gosh, I've been teaching Sunday school, all these different things, reading my Bible, staying away from these places, and I'm looking at that person, I have no idea why they got engaged, and I didn't. We compare. Okay? We look at careers, we look at families, they're like, gosh, why do they have such a nice family? They just look like they're always, they have it together. And we come up and we're like in shambles and always fighting and arguing and stuff like that. We compare. We struggle with comparison quite a bit. But that's because we're trained to compare. Society trains us to compare. Right? Society trains us because we have a legal system. We have a legal system that tells us if we do this right thing, we stay out of trouble. If we do this wrong thing, we get into trouble. That's kind of begins to set the basis for us to understand like how to compare, like good and bad. All right? We also look and we see, at work, if I work hard, then I get this promotion. All right? So we're trained to look for fairness. Okay? When we go academically in school, we work hard, we get good grades, I'm given an academic ranking, okay, in which I can compare myself to other students, right? So we tend to look at life through the eyes of fairness, okay? Is it fair? Is it fair that person gets more money? Is it fair that their family is a nice family? Is it fair that this person got engaged while I'm still struggling and much older than them? All these different things we look and we compare, because we struggle with envy and jealousy. We struggle with envy and jealousy. Right? So, another apple given to the person, we can name this parable. All the hints you need are in the picture. All the hints you need are in the parable. What's in their hand? It's a denarii.
Are those the two servants that got forgiven? No. Because there's like some grapes on top of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, grapes is important.
Oh, is this
Clue?
the one where, like, no, is this the one where he gives them to invest it and one hides it and the other?
No. That has to do with money, though.
That was a good guess.
The workers of the vineyard. Okay, workers of the vineyard. So Matthew chapter 20. Matthew chapter 20. The reason I want to talk about this is because this is a pretty good. This one deals with the issue of envy and jealousy. Dead on when we look at this one. Right? But we always say, like, anytime we're doing a study like parables or something like that, it's always good to give us context, a little bit of context before we jump into the parable itself. So we look at where this parable is coming from. It's coming from the Gospel of Matthew. When we think about Matthew, okay, Matthew wrote his gospel to the Jewish people, okay? And in the beginning of Matthew, he talks about the lineage from Abraham to Jesus, okay? Matthew himself was a Jew and a tax collector, okay? And the Gospel of Matthew challenges, Jesus always in conflict with the Jews, okay? Talk about the law of Moses and how the law of Moses, we live by the law of Moses, and so the Pharisees were always living by the letter of the law, meaning like you got to be circumcised in order to be saved. All these different things, okay? Circumcision is for the Jews, and therefore heaven is for the Jews. So there's a lot of like envy and jealousy kind of around these themes between the Jews and other people, all right? Thinking that the Jews were like, well, we're the chosen people, we have the law of Moses, therefore it's all coming to us. All right? Well, we said parables allow us to compare things, to compare and put things side by side. Okay? And so when we look at this parable, all right, when we look at this parable, what Jesus is trying to say, let's look at this story from the eyes of the kingdom. Okay, let's look at this story from the eyes of the kingdom. All right? And so we look at verse 1, chapter 20, verse 1. It says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard." Okay? So it gives us, the eyes in which we want to see, eyes of the kingdom. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner. Okay? That's key to understanding this. All right? Like a landowner. So now we're going to kind of summarize 2 through 7. All right? It's not up there, but I'm going to kind of read it quickly. It says, now when he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And he went out about the third hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace and said to them, you also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right for you I will give you. So they went. Again he went out about the 6th and the 9th hour and did likewise. And about the 11th hour, and he went out and found others standing idle. And said to them, why have you been standing here idle all day? They said to him, because no one hired us. He said to them, you also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right, you will receive. All right? So that's kind of 2 through 7, gives us, kind of the crux of what's going on in the story. So the vineyard owner went to the marketplace, significance of marketplace, he went to the place where everybody was, right? Which is what Jesus did. He went to where everybody was, right? Because the message was for everybody. Hired people, made an agreement, okay? You will work from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, and it's a denarius, all right? And he went out again, 3rd, 6th, 9th hours. Terms are less defined. Terms are less defined. We actually don't see that, there's a monetary agreement. There's simply the agreement, come and work, and what I see is right, I'll give to you. That's the agreement, 3rd, 6th, and 9th hour. All right? And the 11th hour. 11th hour one is interesting. So he said, about the 11th hour, he went out and found others standing idle. He said to them, why have you been standing here idle all day? They said to him, because no one hired us. If I was a vineyard, I'd be like, I was here on the 1st, 3rd, and 6th, and 9th. I've been here all day asking for people. Where do you come across and say, nobody's hired us? I was here like saying, anybody want to work in the vineyard? Do we get a sense of that? No, it tells us something about the heart of the master. Okay? There's no discourse. There's, you also go into the vineyard, and I'll give you what's right. Okay? I'll give you what's right. There's none of this like, what were you doing? What took you so long? How did you not see me? We don't get a sense of it. It just said he went out 11th hour and said, come into the vineyard. All right? Everybody with me on the parable?
Mm-hmm.
Good. So now the day comes to an end, and it's time to cash out. All right? So let's look at verses 8 and 9. Sorry, I'm standing right in front of the TV. Stand to the side. All right. So when evening had come, the owner of the vineyard said to his steward, call the laborers and give them their wages, beginning with the last to the first. And when those came who were hired about the 11th hour, they each received the denarius. Right? Were the terms violated? No, terms weren't violated. What did he say? I'll give you what is right. So he gave them a denarius. Okay, let's go. Verse 10 and 12. 10 through 12. But when the first came, they supposed that they would receive more, and likewise received each a denarius. And when they had received it, they complained against the landowner, saying, these last men have worked only 1 hour, and you made them equal to us who have borne the burden and the heat of day. Is their argument logical?
Yes.
Yes. The argument is logical. All right? What is their argument based off of? It's based off of the fruit of a merit-based society. Okay? Their logical argument comes as a fruit of a merit-based society. You do this, you get this. You work hard, you get this. Okay? It's all based on whose effort? Their own effort. Okay? Their own effort. What was the goal of the parable? To teach a spiritual truth through a relatable story. And we can all look in our own lives and see other people who have gotten something we want. And we can come back and be like, God, I've been working for that. But you sent it over there. I have issues with that. All right? You told me to go to this Father confession. I did the Father confession thing. He told me to read. I read. Why are they getting what I've been praying for? Why did they get the acceptance letter that I wanted? Why do I have the problems I have and the health issues I have when I do all these things? All right? But the goal of this parable is not about logic. It's about a spiritual truth, okay, which is different. All right? This is about teaching us how the kingdom of heaven functions. Not to say, here, I just want to talk about how you function. No. Because we need to understand the spiritual truth in order to change what is logical to us. All right? Our greatest frustration with God is found in the gap between our expectations and the reality of His provisions. Okay? Our greatest frustration with God is found in the gap. All right? Sorry, I didn't catch up. Our greatest frustration with God is found in the gap between my expectations of what He should deliver and the reality of His provisions. Okay? It's frequently what happens. When we are upset with God, we are expecting Him to do something. He has given us something else. So we look and we end up with jealousy and envy and then frustration towards God. All right? We've lost perspective when that happens. We've lost perspective in life. We've become so accustomed to thinking that God should function based on the same logic that I function with and the same logic and that society functions with. But if God functioned on that, there would be no purpose for God. Okay? God isn't here to function on our level. He's here to reveal the kingdom of heaven to us. And if the kingdom of heaven can be found on earth, then why would we be looking upwards? All right? But the kingdom of heaven isn't here on earth. It's up there. And He's trying to teach us something about it. Okay? So we've lost perspective quite frequently in life when this happens. So let's look at a little bit further, verses 13 and 15. He says, "But he answered one of them and said, 'Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what is yours and go your way. I wish to give this last man the same as you. Is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with my own things? Or is your eye evil because I am good?'" When we look at a denarius a day, okay, denarius a day, back in those times, was what somebody needed for life, okay? It was appropriate. It was how they fed their family. It was how they, found housing. It's what they needed, okay? And God always gives us what we need. But sometimes we become too greedy with God. We don't want just what we need, but we want all the luxuries and the bells and whistles too, because that's what we're accustomed to seeing. All right? God isn't here to give us luxuries. Our ultimate luxury, that's up there. Okay? It's in the kingdom. That's what we're working for. Okay? We're not looking for the luxuries here. He will always provide what is needed. It may not always come in the time that we want, in the fashion that we want. But when we look and say, "Are you giving me what I need?" God will always look and say, "Yes, I will give you what you need." Okay? Not what you want. I'll give you what you need, not what you want. The other thing when we think about God's answer, okay, is we have to understand the sovereignty of God. Right? He told the one, "Is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with my own things? Or is your eye evil because I am good?" All this revolves around this understanding of the sovereignty of God. Right? On what grounds do we have the ability to tell God how to use His resources?
None.
We have no grounds to come to God and say, "This is how you should allocate your resources." I have a good idea. All right? If we were to do that, like, we would make a mess of things. But quite frequently, we've lost so much perspective in life that we come to God in our prayers telling Him how to allocate His resources, how to use the world, how to allocate, give blessing here and curse there. This is what we kind of do. All right? I'll give you an example. Mary and Martha, when Jesus came to their house. Okay? Mary sat at Jesus' feet, and Martha was moving around. All these different things. And Martha came to Jesus out of her frustration and said, "Tell Mary to get up and help." And what did He say? Mary's chosen the right thing. Don't tell me how to orchestrate the situation. I know who to let sit at my feet. But Martha had lost perspective. And all of a sudden, Martha took the place of God and started to instruct God. And we do the same thing when we lost perspective, when we lose perspective in life, when we think that God isn't allocating His blessings in the right way. The other thing, the last point, is God is plenteous in mercy and grace. When we look at this story, was the point of this story around the denarius? Was denarius like the goal of the story? What was the goal of the story? Where did the landowner want people?
Working.
In the vineyard. Right? That was the ultimate goal. The denarius clearly didn't mean much to the landowner. He had plenty of it. But what was the ultimate goal? To get people into the vineyard. That's the eyes of the kingdom of heaven. It's not about the time of day, or the manner, or the avenue, but the end goal is to get people into the vineyard. That's why Christ came, because He wanted all of us in the vineyard. But He goes about it in a different way than what we would think, or what we think is logical. Some people He calls and wakes up at the very end of their life. Some people He calls and uses them for His ministry at the very beginning, the first hour. What was the goal? Where are the two going at the end?
Vineyard.
Kingdom of heaven. The vineyard. Right? So when God is looking out, and He's looking at everybody else, and He gives this person an engagement when you don't have your engagement. Okay? He gives this person a job when you've been out of a job. This person loses a son, or a loved one, or a father, or a mother, and you don't. How's He using all this? For what point? The vineyard. Because through each situation, each challenge that we face, what is His ultimate goal? Figure out how to use this situation, get my kid in the vineyard. Right? But we look at it from logical eyes, from a merit-based eye. And He's saying, no. The truth is, I want everybody in the vineyard. Some people I'll call at the first hour, some at the third, some at the sixth, some at the ninth, and some at the 11th. End point, end goal, the vineyard. So when we look around and we compare at other people, we get envious with other people, take a step back and say, like, God is using the situation in their life just like He's using the situation in my life, so that the two of us end up in the vineyard. If we can reorient ourselves to that and see that the owner of the vineyard, it's the kingdom of heaven. What does the kingdom of heaven want? Everybody in the vineyard. Some will respond, some won't. Why do we look at the thief on the right during Good Friday? What hour did he enter in? 11. What hour did John the Baptist enter in? He was called from the womb, right? The pre-hours, right? But did God reach His goal in both? Yes. Did He go about a completely different way? Yes. So when we look at each other, instead of looking with eyes of envy and jealousy and comparison and shaking our fists at God, can we challenge ourselves to say, whoa, just like in my own troubles and my own problems, God's ultimate goal is saying, come work in my vineyard. Can I look at somebody else and say, through what they are receiving or what they are not receiving, God's goal, get them in the vineyard. Icing on the cake for this one, last verse. So the last will be first, and the first last. Many are called, but few are chosen. Okay? Has nothing to do with first or last. Last or first, first or last. Why? Because the goal is the vineyard. Right? The goal is the vineyard. Many are chosen.
Many are called.
Many are called, but few. That's like I said that. Many are called, but few are chosen. Who actually chooses? We do. Because if we have the has, okay, we will navigate our situations differently. We'll look at our situations instead of shaking our fists at God saying, what's going on? Start looking at them saying, like, how are you pulling me into the vineyard through what I'm going through? Let me sit back. Let me look. Let me pray. Let me be patient for you to work your ways. Right? That's how I understand my calling, and that's how I'm chosen. Because God has given or taken away. Even in the things He's taken away, God has chosen, and He has called. But it's how I respond that determines whether or not I put myself in the vineyard. And that's the ultimate goal of everything that we go through, the vineyard. Any questions? Make sense?
Yeah.